$34 trillion. Let that satisfy. 34 trillion. That's America's debt. A number so large that your mind cannot fully grasp it. And here's the terrifying part. The interest on this debt will soon exceed the entire US military budget. America will spend more money on interest payments than on tanks, jets, and aircraft carriers combined. Think about that for a moment. 88% of global trade involves a single currency. Not the euro, not the yen, not the yuan, the US dollar. This is not a coincidence. This was a plan that took decades to build. More than half of central bank reserves around the world are still held in dollars. But this dominance is fading. In 1999, that figure was 71%. Today, it's 58%, and falling. August 15th, 1971, a date that changed everything. One man appeared on television, and with a single sentence, he changed the world economy forever. The dollar's link to gold ended that night. A promise that stood for decades was broken in minutes. This video will tell you the true story of money, how an empire was built, how it dominated the world, and why it's now crumbling. The late 1800s. The world looked to one power: Britain. London was the financial center of the world. The banks, the insurance companies, the stock exchange. Everything flowed through London. And the British pound was the heartbeat of global trade. If you wanted to buy cotton from India, you paid in pounds. If you wanted to sell steel to South America, you received pounds. The pound sterling was not just a currency. It was the language of money. And the foundation of this entire system was gold. Real, physical gold. Currencies were tied to gold. Exchange rates were fixed. There was order. There was stability. There was trust. This system worked for decades, until 1914. World War I changed everything. Millions of soldiers needed weapons. Tanks needed to be built. Ships needed to be constructed. And governments needed money. Lots of it. So they did what governments always do when they need money. They printed it. Countries suspended the gold standard to finance the war. They borrowed. They inflated. And when the war ended, the damage was done. The old system was broken. But the worst was yet to come. The Great Depression. Banks collapsed. Businesses closed. Unemployment exploded. People lost everything. In 1931, Britain made a historic decision. It abandoned the gold standard completely. The pound was no longer tied to gold. Other countries followed. And what came next was chaos. Currency wars. Countries devalued their currencies to boost exports. Trade barriers went up. Nationalism spread. The world economy was tearing itself apart. But in the middle of this chaos, one country was quietly rising: America. While Europe destroyed itself in World War II, America stayed protected by two oceans. Europe was burning. Cities were bombed. Factories were destroyed. Millions died. But America was building. American factories worked day and night. They produced tanks, planes, ships, and weapons. And they sold them to the Allies for gold. By the end of the war, something remarkable had happened. Roughly 60 to 70% of the world's gold reserves were now in one place: Fort Knox, America. Europe's gold had crossed the Atlantic for safekeeping, and it never came back. So by 1944, the situation was clear. Europe was destroyed and broke. America was rich and powerful. The old British system was dead, and the world needed a new financial order. The stage was set, and the question was simple: who will control the money? July 1944, New Hampshire. The town of Bretton Woods, the Mount Washington Hotel, More than 700 delegates from 44 countries gathered here. The goal was to rebuild the post-war world. But the real battle took place behind closed doors. On one side was John Maynard Keynes, one of history's most brilliant economists. He represented Britain. Keynes had a vision, a supranational currency called Bancor. It would belong to no single country. It would be fair for everyone. On the other side was Harry Dexter White, the U.S. Treasury's man, and he had all of America's power behind him. White's plan was different. The dollar would become the center of the world. The fight lasted weeks, but the outcome was decided from the start, because there was a simple rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. America had the gold. America had the factories. America had the credit. Britain was exhausted from war, and the agreement was signed. The rules were as follows. 1. The dollar was pegged to gold. $35 equals 1 ounce. 2. All other currencies were pegged to the dollar. 3. The IMF was created for crisis loans. 4. The World Bank was created for reconstruction. When Keynes left the table, he carried the last breath of an empire. White had laid the foundation of a new one. The dollar was now the world's money. But this story didn't begin in 1944. It began much earlier. November 1910. A group of men secretly traveled to Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia, under the guise of a duck hunting trip. But they were hunting something else entirely. Who was in that room? Senator Nelson Aldrich, the powerful head of the Finance Committee, Paul Warburg, a banker who wanted European-style central banking, Henry Davison, right-hand man of J.P. Morgan, Frank Vanderlip, president of National City Bank, Charles Norton, First National Bank. These men were America's most powerful bankers, and they were planning something big. America's central bank. Why the secrecy? Because the idea of a central bank was toxic in America. The public feared Wall Street's control over their money. 3 years later, 1913. The Federal Reserve Act passed through Congress. President Woodrow Wilson signed it into law, and the Federal Reserve was born. So what is the Fed? Private? Government? The answer is neither. The Fed is a hybrid beast. The Board of Governors is a government agency. But the 12 regional Federal Reserve banks are owned by private member banks, a structure unlike anything else in the world. And what happened to the dollar after the Fed was created? $1 in 1913 would be worth about $30 today. That means your money has lost 97% of its value in 100 years. The power to print money now belonged to the Fed. After 1944, the system was in place, and it worked. The dollar was tied to gold. Other currencies were tied to the dollar. Global trade grew. The U.S. pumped $13 billion into Europe through the Marshall Plan. Europe recovered, and every payment was made in dollars. America was now the center of the world economy. But by the late 1960s, cracks began to appear. The Vietnam War was draining money. Social programs were expensive. America was printing too many dollars, and foreign countries started to worry. French President Charles de Gaulle saw it first. He called it America's exorbitant privilege, and he demanded gold for his dollars. Other countries followed. America's gold reserves were draining fast. August 15th, 1971. Sunday evening. President Nixon appeared on television and made an announcement that shocked the world. The dollar would no longer be convertible to gold. Just like that. The promise that held the system together was broken. Bretton Woods was dead. The dollar was now tied to nothing, only trust. But America found a new anchor: oil. 1974. A strategic deal was made with Saudi Arabia. Oil would be sold in dollars, and petrodollars would flow back into American banks. Gold was gone, but oil took its place. The dollar remained the world's money. Fast forward to today. America's debt has surpassed $36 trillion, a number so large it's almost meaningless. But here's what's not meaningless: the interest on that debt. America now spends more on interest payments than on its entire military. Think about that. The most powerful military in the world costs less than the interest on America's credit card. And the dollar's global dominance? It's slipping. In 1999, the dollar made up 71% of central bank reserves. Today, it's 58%. Still dominant, but falling. The BRICS nations are growing. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. They're trading in their own currencies. They're building alternatives to the dollar system. And central banks around the world are buying gold at record levels. 2022 saw the highest gold purchases in history. 2023 was the second highest. They're preparing for something. The pattern is clear. More debt, more printing, less trust. The system built in 1944 is showing its age. The system built in a hotel in 1944 ruled the world for 80 years. Now that system is cracking. So what happens next? Will the dollar collapse? Will America find a way out? Or is there a bigger plan? In 1933, the US government confiscated gold from its own citizens. They might be planning to do the same thing again, but this time with Bitcoin. Next episode, we'll reveal the hidden strategy, how America plans to pay off $34 trillion of debt, and why Bitcoin is at the center of it all. Subscribe so you don't miss it.